This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, compulsively punchable.
He's the kind of guy who you'd probably just punch on the arm really hard if you ever met him.
Worshipped by feminists.
He pokes fun at feminism and women, just joking around, his whole sandwich making thing.
Mildly inspiring.
Yes, I recommend the Ben Settle Show, and anybody who isn't on it, that's their own loss.
Somewhat authentic.
Ben is a very distinct personality. There's no fluff. I can't stand fluff.
Syrupy sweet.
Tells it like it is, and sometimes may not be the most polite manner, shall we say.
Kind of useful.
So I have spent tens of thousands of dollars on coaching and masterminds, and I've learned more from Ben Settle's podcast than from any of that.
Semi-intelligent.
Ben sounds like a crazy guy at times, but he's one of the smartest individuals in marketing I've ever met.
Mostly forgettable.
He's always in the forefront of my mind.
The BenSettle.com podcast begins now.
This is Ben Settle of bensettle.com. And Jonathan, it's very nice to hear your sweet, sexy voice once again.
So it's a little weird. It's only bensettle.com now. What happened?
So, all right. So I guess we should go over that a little bit, right? So the Ben Settle Show, the old podcast, is no longer... there's archives of, there's going to be, it's on Jonathan's site at thepodcastfactory.com. It's also on my, Jonathan, by the time this is airing, we'll have it on my site too, all those old ones.
Okay.
So, they're still out there floating around. What we did, this is all actually what I did, I should say. I'm not going to blame you for this, John. I'll blame you for everything else, but I'm not going to blame you for what I'm about to say. So I had this idea to make it a paid membership so that people have to pay for access to the podcast from now on, because it's just the way I roll. Well, that turned into the biggest nightmare of my business career, one of them, which kind of rolled it and turned into Jonathan's nightmare. And it just was not, I'm not going to go into all the details, but it just didn't work.
Let's call it what it is, though, because there was a lot of people before we launched that membership thing that said, what if you fail? What if you fail? But I want it to be clear, and I want it on record out there, that we failed for all the wrong reasons. We got too many members, we made too much money, and we had too many headaches.
Yes, which is the thing that I'll get into that too, because, I got to give myself some props here too at the same time. I'm not just going to self-deprecate. This show is not a self-deprecating show or someone else's show.
Right.
You don't, here you get obnoxious arrogance. Okay. So it was the most successful launch that I've ever done and been involved in, bar none. And we did get to, it was weird. Had we had PayPal working, it would have been an even bigger nightmare. But yeah, it was so profitable, and that was great, but it wasn't worth the headache. So anyway, long story short, too long, didn't read version. That we ended that, and I wanted to start a new one for the new year here of 2017. And that's what you're listening to. And Jonathan, I got to say, so I thought long and hard about what I want to do for this first episode. Now, you probably don't remember this because, it was like 18 years ago, in internet time, I should say, the first episode of the old Ben Settle Show. And this is, and I'm going to differentiate this now. This is called the bensettle.com show, not the Ben Settle Show. So for anyone who thinks that this is a continuation of that, it's not. This is a whole different animal and all that. Different name, all hosted on my own site this time, so Jonathan doesn't have the nightmares and, waking up Cupcake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats and all that, having nightmares about all this stuff. Don't send him a bunch of customer requests or anything like that. We're not even going to have products. Like, there's not going to be a store or anything like that. But I thought long and hard about what I want to talk about for this first one. Because the last time I did a podcast, the first one was like, I just went on that weird date the night before, and I told the story about crazy chicks and like the rationalization hamster, about how she was kind of, I spent like 6 hours of my precious, valuable time, Jonathan, very valuable time, hanging out with that girl. And then she tried to pull this, like, I don't kiss on the first date crap, which I don't tolerate. And, but then after midnight, she said it was okay because it's no longer the first date. And I thought, man, that is the rationalization hamster. Like, that is a portrait of the rationalization hamster. But this is going to be different. This time I'm going to talk about something very important to me. It's important to people who hear it. In fact, well, I'll just tell you the story of it. So in October, I spoke at AWAI's copywriting boot camp and job fair, which was that was a very fun experience. I recommend anybody, if you're into copywriting and all that, especially if you're newer, it's a great place to go, their boot camp. I highly recommend it. It was great. It's like 4 or 5 days. It was great. Well, when I was done talking, we had a panel. I got to sit on a panel with God, I hope I'm saying her name right. Carline Anglade-Cole. I think that's how you say her name. She's one of the best A-list copywriters in the game. Absolutely brilliant. Genius at copywriting, especially her talk. I mean, dude, her headlines are the best. Her headlines, Jonathan, are even better than mine, believe it or not. And way better. I mean, I can see why she's so good, like beats controls and all that. But I was up on a panel because they had a panel after I got done talking because the three of us, me, her, and Brian Kurtz, and you know who Brian Kurtz is. You must be a newbie to this whole thing. The three of us spoke that morning, and then they had us on a panel up on stage and all that. And one of the questions we got asked was like, why do we do this? What's the motivation for this? It's an interesting question that people give different answers to. So they gave their answers, which were, I don't remember what their answers were or not. But then I said, I just don't remember, honestly.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not because I wasn't paying attention or anything. And then they handed me the microphone, and you could just see people were expecting me to say something weird. I guess I have that reputation now. When I'm speaking, I always come out with something weird. And like I started my talk because I talked right after Brian Kurtz, and I had to go up there and say something to wake people up. So I said, well, I'm about to dispel all that horse shit Brian just told you.
Nice.
I was joking, of course, and he knew I was joking. But that's what you do. That's what I do. I just like to go up there and say weird stuff. People ask me, Ben, do you get nervous talking? I said, I never get nervous. In fact, I get anxious. Like I can't wait to do it. And I'm always like, how can I screw with the audience's mind a little bit? Like that's the only thought running through my head. Like the talk is like secondary as far as I'm concerned. I just want to screw with people's heads. But anyway, all this, who cares about any of this stuff? Let's go back to the whole point here. I was asked this question about why do I do this? What's my motivation? All that stuff. And I said, power. I want power. So it wasn't to commit mass genocide or anything like that. That's not why I want power. Okay, that has nothing to do with it. And I told this story to the audience, and I was talking about the Boron letters. So the Boron letters is a series of letters that the late, great Gary Halbert wrote to his son Bond while he was in prison in the Boron Federal Penitentiary for a crime he didn't actually commit or anything like that. I mean, you could read his story on the GaryHalbertLetter.com. It's called The Dark Side of Success. That's the article to him. But so early in that book, there is a story he talks about where in the prison yard, there's a cat named Crackers. And, nobody likes this cat, apparently. Apparently, he was just kind of a mangy cat that was kind of mean. But anyway, he was watching the cat, like, bat this mouse around. Then he'd let the cat would, like, let the mouse up, like it's going to get away. And then it would catch it again and, like, bat it around. And it kept tormenting this mouse literally to death. He just kept doing that until it died. And he was like, I don't know if there's a purpose in me telling you this story other than something that he read in the National Enquirer where there is no justice, there's only power. And I read that back in 2003. I believe that's when I got that book. And it has stuck with me ever since. It's like, I want to have power from necessarily to be like the Emperor Palpatine in Star Wars. So I can like zap everybody with electricity coming out of my hands or anything like that, Jonathan. But it's more like just self-preservation. I don't like anyone having control over my destiny. I don't want anybody able to tell me what to do, where to go. I don't like authority. I don't like the fact that, the government can sit there and make up charges against people and put them in prison. They rot in prison. One of the organizations that I support, Jonathan, with my hard-earned coinage, is called the Innocence Project. And I'm telling you, this stuff happens all the time. Innocent people constantly being put in prison. And it's just like, there's stuff like that just bothers me. And to me, being successful in business and having cash flow and all that gives you a power. It can help protect you against a lot. Not everything, obviously, but protect you against your own government, protect you against other businesses, protect you against your own bad choices in some cases. I believe it was John Carlton who said one of his excellent products, like money can solve all the problems that not having money creates. So that's why I do it. Like, this is my motivation. And here's the funny thing. As soon as I got done saying this, Brian Kurtz turns to me and goes, I'm changing my answer to that. So it was one of those things I don't think people were expecting. Who comes out there and says stuff like that? Everything's always like, well, I do it for my kids and I do it. No, I do it for power. And so that's what I want to talk about in this first golden episode of the bensettle.com podcast. Jonathan, do you have any questions before I begin?
I can't wait.
Or can I just roll right into this?
Roll in.
Okay. So I thought I made a very small list of things that will give you power. And actually, Jonathan, if you can hear the rustling of this paper right now, I added some things to this list that you haven't even seen yet. So, this is going to be new to you. Here's some things you can do to have power, if this is what you desire to have like I do. First of all, self-improvement. You got to constantly be improving yourself. All right. Otherwise, you're not going to have any power. You're going to be squandering whatever power you have. You ever read the comic book or see the movie Spawn, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the comic book, Spawn is just about this like government guy, like assassin guy who gets killed and he gets thrown down to hell, and the devil makes a deal with him saying, become my servant and I'll send you back and you'll be alive. And, it came with some catches. He came back 5 years later. His wife was already married. He looked like a totally different person. It was kind of like a catch-22 like thing. But anyway, the whole Spawn thing is he was given a certain amount of power. And once he used it all up, he would have to go back down to hell again. That's kind of how it is with people who don't do self-improvement. It's like you gotta keep getting better at whatever it is you do. Now, what that is going to be different for everyone. For me, I'm constantly improving my email skills because this is what I'm strong in. I don't sit there and try to improve my SEO skills or anything else. I don't sit there and try to do my own AdWords. I outsource all that stuff. I outsource everything that I'm not completely, like, the only thing that I'm going to do. Like, nobody writes my copy and nobody writes my email. So those are the two things I'm always trying to get better at. I'm just trying to get better at persuasion in general. That's my version of self-improvement. For someone else, it could be something else. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you do that makes you you. Okay, that's what you do. But self-improvement is you have to constantly do it, or whatever power you have is going to be gone, and it's going to be gone quick, just like Spawn. So another thing that'll give somebody power is financial independence. Now, Jonathan, I don't know if you are financially independent right now. I don't even know what everyone's definition of financial independence is, but my definition is I don't have to do anything. I get up in the morning, I say, what can I do to amuse myself? And, I can do whatever I want. There's nothing I have to do. There's nobody I have to serve or anything like that. It's just, to me, that's what I think of financial independence. I'm not relying on anything or anyone. I'm not even having to rely on my own manual labor. I'm not there yet, Jonathan. I mean, unfortunately, I built the kind of business where it's kind of dependent on me.
Yeah.
So this is something in 2017 I will be working on, which I should have been doing a long time ago, but sometimes I'm a slow learner, Jonathan. What do you want me to say? Okay, sometimes I'm a slow. What do you people want from me? Okay, I'm a slow learner sometimes. It's how it goes. Another thing that will give you power, and this is more of a mental thing, is outcome independence. This is another thing I spoke about right after I spoke at AWAI's thing. I was invited to speak at Brian Kurtz's Titans Masterclass, and during our Q&A session for that, somehow this came up, outcome independence, not caring about what happened, the outcome of something. Like, your feet are still, it's like in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and the guy's talking about his philosophy about like girls and all that. And he's like, look, whether she stays, lays, or prays, I don't care. My feet are still tapping. This is the attitude I have when it comes to not only relationships and all that sort of thing, but also business and customers. And when I did clients, my happiness and my future is not going to be dependent upon what someone else does. To the extent that I can arrange this is another way of a version of having power by not letting other people have power over you. And other people's stupid decisions having power over you. Because face it, Jonathan, a lot of bad things that happen to people aren't necessarily because of a decision that you or I made. It's a decision someone else made. For example, the old podcast. We'll talk about that. Your nightmares were caused by my bad decisions. All right? The nightmares that poor Vanessa had to go through were made by my bad decisions. The nightmares that Misty had to go through were made by my, not that she seemed happy with all this. She didn't have a problem with any of this stuff, but I had a problem with people hunting her down, with customer service. And I had a problem hunting you down for customer service and hunting me down when we had a customer service in place. But at the end of the day, this all came from my bad decisions. And, luckily you guys were all outcome independent. You guys were not dependent on that site, working long-term or anything like that. And so everybody was happy. In fact, I think it's best to get in business with people who are outcome independent, who don't need to be in business with you. I know that sounds kind of weird, but those tend to be the most harmonious business relationships, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
Another thing that gives people power is not having debt. Now, I'm probably more extreme with this than most people, Jonathan. I had spent so many years in debt that I would literally just fantasize about not being in debt for many years. It was like, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I remember when I finally paid off my last debt, which was a student loan from college, which I never really used for anything. So that was nice and worthless thing. But when I paid that off in 2009, I was like I was on cloud nine. I couldn't even tell you, because that had been like a 9-year, if not longer, struggle trying to get through all that stuff. When I bought my house last year, over here on the coast, the beautiful coast. And I always have to throw in beautiful because people think I live in some hellhole town or something. But actually, I live in like a really freaking awesome place. I like under a bridge, I'm not like your typical internet marketer. No, and people say, why did you buy a house? Shouldn't you rent? There's nothing to rent out here. That's why. And I wanted to live here. So I kind of had to buy a house. And I got one that was like, it's like 600 feet from the ocean. It's awesome. There's nothing I would change about it. But I didn't like being in debt with that. In fact, Jonathan, I did the unthinkable for my business when I decided to buy this house. And that is because I wanted to buy it with cash. I want debt. So I tried to buy it all with cash. But I did the unthinkable because I did go into a little bit of debt because, to get a mortgage because I had taxes coming up and all that. And I didn't want to be put in a situation where, I blew my load, so to speak, on something and then have to deal with the IRS or whatever. So I kind of spaced it out. It took me 33 days to pay it off. So I guess, I didn't pay it all with cash. But I did the unthinkable and I took on a couple consulting clients. Because I wanted to generate some cash. And, I generated 30 grand in cash and, that helped do that. So my whole point is this, but not that's how I didn't have to do that. I could have just let it, I could have rode this out forever. I could have just, I got a mortgage. I'll pay $800 a month, whatever it is. I'll screw that. I paid it all off as fast as possible because I hate debt. Now there's some good debt out there. I'm not saying that, when you're doing real estate and all that, I understand that you're not going to buy all these houses with cash and then rent them out, right? You use bank. Is that how you do it, Jonathan?
Yeah, leverage.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not talking about that kind of debt. I'm talking about personal debt. I had this when I was at Brian Kurtz's masterclass there. I had the opportunity to finally meet someone I've been a fan of for many years. His name is Dan Locke. You know who Dan Locke is by any chance, John?
I know the name. I might have even met him in Orlando.
It's possible, but he's a really cool guy. And we got into this talk about this kind of stuff and, leveraging your money to build actual wealth and all that. And it was very eye-opening conversation for me. But the next thing, multiple streams of income, which everybody hears about this all the time. It's big deal, multiple income streams. Yeah. But how many people actually have multiple income streams?
Not many.
Not very many. Not many. I mean, I'm always looking to install more. I just don't want to have to deal with them. It's got to be stuff that's hands off. And, but the more you can get, the better, because then if one goes down, it doesn't really screw your life up too much. So the more income streams you get, the better. It gives you power. Three more things that give you power now these three, Jonathan, you didn't know about because I sneakily didn't send these to you.
Son of a gun.
Because I just thought about them before we started. The show. One is patience. So I don't know, Jonathan, if you read my villains book.
I've read it a couple times. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a whole chapter in there about patience. And we did a whole Ben Settle show, the old Ben Settle show thing just about patience. It's very, very, in fact, didn't you tell me that had the biggest, all the podcasts, that was the one that had the biggest impact on you? I thought it was patience.
It was it definitely opened my eyes, but you know what? I'm not as patient as I should be.
Well, I'm not either. I'm always trying to be more patient. And believe me, Jonathan, some of the chicks I've been dating over the last 6 months have given me exercising my patience and testing my patience in so many ways. My God, which has been good though. Patience is good. So anytime I'm forced to be more patient, it's a good thing. Even if it's kind of like exercise, even though I hate doing it while I'm doing it, I'm glad that I did it. So patience will give you power. And, I could go into a whole rant about patience. I'll just say this. If you go to my site, bensettle.com, and you go to the podcast page, we're going to have a link. By the time this is being recorded, I'm doing my time thing here again, Jonathan, where I can't figure out where we're at on the calendar. But by the time you're hearing this, there will be a page with this new podcast on it, but I also have a link to the old podcast, and just go through those archives. There's one about patience there. I did a whole show about it, and there's no reason for me to have to go through it all right now again. So next one, punctuality. I bet you didn't see that one coming.
That's one of your
punctuality giving you power.
That's one of your favorites.
It really is. Every week when I go to my kung fu lessons over in the Burgle, which is an hour and a half drive for me, I literally pull in at exactly the same time. He's amazed that I'm able to do. It's never a minute late or a minute early. It's right at that time, and that's because I leave so early. I give myself 2 hours, even though it's an hour and a half drive. And there's this place in the town next to the Burgle called Winston, where there's a little pull out, you can just go down there and down to the Umpire River or whatever. And I just sit there and I just sit in the car and I, work on stuff or read or whatever. And so I know exactly how many minutes it is from there to Sifu's dojo over there. And, that's how I do it. Now, here's the thing. This isn't something that I've figured out or anything through life or anything like that. This is right out of Dan Kennedy's magnificent No BS Time Management book, which I recommend everybody read. I didn't realize how much power punctuality gives a person until reading that book. And there's lessons in that chapter. I think it's the third or fourth chapter. There's lessons in there. It makes you realize who you should be doing business with and who you shouldn't be doing business with. I'm not going to do business with people, not any kind of long-term business at least, with people who are not punctual. because in his example was like the printer. He had this printer he prints a lot of stuff, like for his seminars and all that. And he was talking about, he met with a printer and the printer was 10 minutes late for their meeting to see if he'd get his business. And he's like, I already knew before the guy got there that I wasn't going to hire him. In that business, if you don't have things printed on time, it might as well be 2 years late. 2 minutes might as well be 2 years if you miss a deadline for a mailing or something like that. And it was a good example of just the power of punctuality. It's like, you don't want to deal with people who are not punctual. People in Roseburg, Oregon, where I used to live, nobody's punctual in that town, Jonathan. Not a single person. Not even one of my good friends, Trevor Mock, who I highly recommend people in the real estate investment industry especially follow him. OnCarrot.com is his site. Brilliant guy, brilliant businessman. But that dude is never on time, man. It's like every time I deal with him, he's never on time. And, that's just how it is. And everyone in that town is like that. So it's not his fault necessarily. When I was dating my ex-copywriting apprentice, believe me, she was always late until dating me for a couple weeks. She was on time all the time after that, because people who are punctual tend to not tolerate people who are not punctual for very long. And people who are not punctual have to kind of get their act together, or the people who are punctual simply say, look, time to go, So no, you got to be punctual. Got to be punctual. Jonathan, you're punctual. You're a very punctual guy. And I appreciate that.
You as well, brother.
Absolutely. Oh, I know I am. My props come. I get so many props, man. I just assume it. Assume the props.
You're so good that Cupcake asked me today. She's like, I don't really need to confirm Ben because she confirms all my appointments. I'm like, Ben's there. He said he was going to be there. He's there.
Yeah, see, Cupcake and I have a mutual understanding. She knows to trust El Bembo now after the membership site thing, right? She knows. She knows that I have your best interest and her best interest and your new child's best interest. All that, I put all of your interests up there. Not as important as my interests, of course, but I do give you guys but I do take it seriously. I will take care of you all. It's all good. But again, it's just punctuality. It's important. By the way, if you're dealing with someone who's not punctual, just being punctual gives you the moral authority over them, and you might get away with more shenanigans and other things that, there might be things you're weak in that you would get away with because you're like, look, well, at least I'm on time. I don't know if that helps your life or not. I don't know if it adds to it, but something to think about. And finally, Jonathan, before I wrap up this show, and there's many ways to get power here. These are just a few. Lastly is self-discipline, which again, this comes right out of the Dan Kennedy No BS Time Management book, which I highly recommend. And he has a whole chapter on self-discipline and about how it just gives you lots of power over yourself, which then gives you power over other people to bend them to your will, if you catch my drift. And, self-discipline is something that everybody's lacking these days. I mean, we're like the most undisciplined people in the world. And I blame technology for this, Jonathan. I really do. I mean, we live in such a slacker-friendly society now because we have robots doing everything. It's like, you don't have
There's an app called Slack.
It's like this, and I'm all about slackership, don't get me wrong, but it hurts self-discipline. There was a time, Jonathan, where it would amaze people, like when I had roommates and things like that. When my alarm went off, bam, I was up. I just had the self-discipline. I never did the snooze button or anything like that. And it would almost drive my roommates crazy. This is back in college. They were like, how do you do that? Because they just, they would keep pushing snooze all morning. I don't know. I just had that self-discipline. These days, Jonathan, I do not have that self-discipline at all. I don't have to really get up or use an alarm anymore, but there are times when I really want to get up and get some work done. But I just sit in bed, just laying there, relaxing, petting my dog, whatever. I'll get up in a few minutes. There was a time that I would never have done that. I would have been up, gotten up, taken a shower, and been ready like within 20 minutes of my eyes waking up in the morning. So look, these are things that I'm always working on too. That's my whole point. Nobody's perfect. Some of us are close, but nobody's perfect. And that's all I got, Jonathan, for this first bensettle.com show. Next week, I knew you were going to ask me about this. I'm already ahead of you on this. We're going to talk about, it's something I learned many years ago when I was trying to get my head wrapped around like the whole idea of game and all that and dating and all this stuff. There's always another girl. There's always another client. People who are worried about like things like that, you're not going to worry after the next episode, whether it be clients or customers or relationship stuff. There's always another person to replace the person that you're worried about losing or whatever, or that person that you've lost. And I will make you all feel much better about this. For those of you who despair about such things, and you can thank me then. You don't have to thank me now. It's all good.
Awesome. So there it is. The first new bensettleshow.com. Wait, no, bensettle.com show.
Yes. I know. And, you know, that's the thing. We're both going to keep saying that. We're, you know, because we're used to saying Ben Settle Show. But we're going to have the self-discipline and the patience to get through that and say it the right way.
All right. So we will be back in your earbuds next week. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
You've been listening to the bensettle.com podcast. To get your hands on a free issue of Ben Settle's prestigious $97 per month email player's newsletter, simply go to www.bensettle.com.
This is the podcastfactory.com.